We had to compete. And at the heart of the turnaround here, the heart of the transformation was unleashing opportunity. And we needed to have economic growth in order to do it. I mean, growth is a good thing.
Hello, and welcome to the Washington Examiner's In Focus podcast. I'm Senior Editor Peter Laffin, and today I'm excited to be joined by Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, who recently contributed an essay to our In Focus section titled The Great Virginia Renaissance. Governor, Happy New Year and welcome to the show.
Peter, thanks for having me. Great to be with you. And I just look forward to talking about the Great Virginia Renaissance. Virginia has changed a lot over the last 4 years, and it's been just extraordinary to see it happen.
So you're coming to the end of this experience. It's your second to last week in office, and it's a remarkable American experience leading one of our greatest states, our most historic states, and becoming a prominent national figure along the way. What's something that you know now at the end of your term that you didn't know before being sworn in?
Well, I guess I would highlight two things, Peter. First, when I was coming in, I'm a homegrown Virginian, and I had a huge respect and belief in Virginia's history. But I'll tell you, being governor of Virginia, you stand on the shoulders of giants. And you think about it, Patrick Henry was our first governor, and he was followed up by Thomas Jefferson. And just the weight of being the 74th governor when we have such a great lineage of leaders is a big load to carry. But second of all, is how much you can get done in office as governor of Virginia. And so many people told me that I'd be frustrated, that being a businessman coming into government, I would find it to be slow, and of course, the pace of government to be frustrating. And the reality is it's been the exact opposite. We have gotten an enormous amount done. In fact, I always laugh, when I presented my original day one game plan, which was a complete and comprehensive transformation of the Commonwealth of Virginia, people would say to me, well, what are the one or two things you're really going to get done? And I would say, no, we're going to get it all done. And in fact, we have. And I think that is the most inspiring part of this whole journey, which is you can transform all of it. Government can be run better. Results can be extraordinary, not mediocre. And that has been, I think, the most rewarding and encouraging part of this whole journey.
So I want to get into your governing philosophy and your political philosophy. And one thing I've heard you say a number of times, you talk a lot about winning states and losing states. And before we get into maybe the specifics of your tenure in Virginia, what are, just generally speaking, some of the ingredients for the winning states and the losing states?
Well, first of all, I'm a competitor, and my wife claims I might be the most competitive person on the planet. And therefore, I want to make sure that the things that I'm involved in are winning. And I'd seen Virginia really fall behind. As I said, I'm a homegrown Virginian. And to look out my window when I was in my 30th year of my business career and see a Virginia that I really didn't recognize, because Virginia was really falling behind when Virginia had historically been a leader, was incredibly frustrating. And there really are winning states and losing states. The winning states are leading in job growth. The winning states are leading in population migration. The winning states are leading in budget surplus and revenue growth. And therefore, the winning states are leading in opportunity and prosperity for their citizens. And the losing states are doing the exact opposite. And the reality in America today is there's a dozen states that are winning, that are leading in every category, and there are a dozen states that are losing in every category. And then there's, call it 26 states between them that are kind of stagnant. And that is really the opportunity for leadership, where Virginia, as I said, was falling behind, and I don't want to behind Virginia. Virginia has always led from the founding of this nation, and I wanted to see Virginia lead again.
So you titled your essay The Great Virginia Renaissance. And as we know, the historical Renaissance came after a dark age. And so maybe you could tell us a bit about the Virginia you inherited.
Yeah, it was dark. I can't put it any other way. We saw a Virginia that was falling behind in every category. First, a Virginia that had stagnant job growth for 8 years. of Virginia that had seen more people move away to the other 49 states than move here for 9 years in a row. A state that was essentially shrinking. We saw a state that was from a opportunity standpoint, watching businesses close left and right during the pandemic. Bad policies had forced businesses to close. 25,000 small businesses shut their door as they decided that business was not essential. And as a result, we watched Virginia go from being a leader to being near the bottom in job recovery coming out of the pandemic. Academically, Virginia was failing its students. They were pushing parents out of the classroom. And we can't forget the famous words of my opponent, which is parents don't have a right to decide what's being taught in their children's schools. I mean, could there be anything further from the rights of parents, which in Virginia have a fundamental right to make decisions with regard to their child's education, of course, their upbringing and their care. That is what Virginia is all about. And it was evacuating this responsibility. And therefore, we watched standards in Virginia education decline to the nation's worst. We watched the learning loss in fourth grade in reading and math become the worst in Virginia and the nation. And we saw Virginia leading in chronic absenteeism, students deciding that they weren't going to come to school hardly at all. I mean, this was basically a failing report card for a state that historically had led the nation in education. We also were seeing a 20-year high in murder rate. On average, 5 Virginians were dying every day from fentanyl overdoses. And basic services were failing. I mean, don't even try to go to the DMV back in 2020 or 2021 and get anything done. You wait forever. There was over 1 million backlog claims over at the Virginia Employment Commission. They were just in boxes sitting in rooms with the doors locked. And of course, the emergency management system was failing. A week before I became governor, there was the horrific I-95 ice storm where Virginians and a lot of Americans were stuck on the highway for over a day because the emergency management system wasn't working. I mean, that was the Virginia that I walked into, and that was the Virginia that I think I was hired to fix.
It's a remarkable turnaround. I want to get into what were some of the strategies that you enacted in order to make this turnaround happen. For one thing, you attracted over 150 billion in capital investments, and that's more than the past 6 administrations combined. How were you able to make Virginia competitive again in what you've called the SEC of economic development?
Well, it really is the SEC of economic development. You really think about it. Of those winning states, the vast majority of them are right in the southeast of the United States: Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas. Couple years, Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, Oklahoma have come on strong. I mean, these states are winning, and we had to compete. And at the heart of the turnaround here, the heart of the transformation was unleashing opportunity. And we needed to have economic growth in order to do it. I mean, growth is a good thing, bottom line. And we needed to jumpstart the growth engine. And so when we saw ourselves competing and losing in previous administrations, particularly for the big manufacturing jobs, it came down to the fact that the value proposition, what Virginia was able to offer, just didn't compete. It was overregulated. There weren't sites that were ready. The workforce development programs were scattered all over the place. And of course, it was being presented in a very bland way that didn't compel any senior executive to choose Virginia for a big investment. We had to change all of that. So we overhauled workforce development, and now for 3 years in a row, have had the #1 rated customized workforce development program in America. We worked with our General Assembly and appropriated $500 million in site readiness and economic development investment. We went to work to deregulate, and I just asked everybody in one of my early executive orders to get to work deregulating, to get 25% of regulations out or streamlined, and we're now at 35%, saving Virginians $1.4 billion a year. And finally, we overhauled the way we thought about how to go at economic development. Let's pick sectors that we know we're going to have big investment, big job growth, and let's go win. And that's exactly what we did. And then finally, I'm just personally involved in this. I do believe that senior executives, CEOs, want to talk to CEOs. And so I have a very aggressive calling program. I go visit prospective companies and invite them to come to Virginia. And I do believe that that last step of negotiating and understanding what is needed in order to drive success is critical. And $156 billion is a lot. I mean, listen, as you said, it's more than the last 6 administrations, but it also will drive growth for the foreseeable future because there's 80,000 jobs that come with it that'll be hired in the next few years, plus 40,000 construction jobs. And it just gets back to the basic truth that growth is a good thing. More investment, more jobs, and more opportunity for Virginians.
Let's get back to education for a second. Most people attribute your victory in 2021 to your campaign's laser focus on education. Tell us a bit how your government strategy has enabled this turnaround in education to happen.
Well, as I said, what I stepped into in 2021 as a candidate, and then 2022 when I was fortunate enough to be hired, was a Virginia education product that was failing parents and students. And we just had to go to work and overhaul all of it. First, we had to put parents back at the head of the table. And that was just a big first step. You know, we passed legislation to allow parents to remove sexually explicit curriculum from their child's learning process. And we also got the masks off kids very quickly and made sure our schools were open and thriving. That was a big step, number one. But we then recognized that a system that believed that equal outcomes should in fact be the objective, a system that believed that one size fits all, a system that had pushed vocational education out, and a system that had really put a lid on exceptional accelerated learning was a system that wasn't serving any of our students. And so we had to go to work on all of that. And so first we overhauled our curriculum offering for all of our major subjects. And that was critically important. The second thing we did was overhaul our accreditation system in order to provide real transparency into how our schools are doing and how students are doing. Third thing we had to do was make sure that students could stay focused. And we got cell phones out of the classroom. And I think we were one of the first states to have cell phone free education from tip to tip of the Commonwealth. And then finally, we had to make sure that expectations of excellence were being maintained no matter what the pathway, because we needed multiple pathways. We reinvigorated career and technical education so that students could get an industry recognized credential or certificate and go straight to work if they chose to. But we wanted to have the best ones. And today in Virginia, nearly 80% of the high school students graduate with a credential or a certificate. But we also wanted to make sure that there were choices within the public school system and of course choices outside the public school system. And so we've launched 15 lab schools that focus on a particular region's needs. So we have a space lab school where we launch rockets, and we have a maritime lab school where we build ships. We have healthcare lab schools in our healthcare deserts, and we have lab schools that focus on teachers in areas where we have teacher shortages. We have lab schools that focus on coding and technical developments. And of course, we have lab schools that are focusing on early education and particularly reading. The point is that we needed to give students and families choices, not only within the public school system, but then we also accelerated our scholarship-driven school choice activities. So students and families that couldn't afford to get out of the public school system would have an opportunity to do so. All of this was targeted on raising expectations of excellence, putting parents back in charge of their children's lives, and having great transparency on how our schools were doing so that we could meet the needs with record funding. See, one of the things that came out of our record economic development and record job growth has been record revenue at the state. And so in addition to being able to have record tax relief, almost $10 billion over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, but we've also had record investment in education. We wanted it targeted towards the schools that needed the support. And that's what our transparency has allowed us to do, is to identify the schools that are really doing well and the ones that really need help, and to be honest about it and not to lie to our parents, which gets to my last step, which is to be very, very candid and transparent. when I came in, we had an enormous honesty gap. What do I mean by that? State tests were saying that students were doing very well, that 70 to 75% of the students were proficient in reading and math. But national tests were showing us that it was actually 40 points lower than that. And of course, what does that mean? The state was lying to parents about how their kids were doing. We wanted to make sure that we were fully transparent, there was no honesty gap, and then we could go to work to raise expectations, to raise outcome, to drive funding to those areas that need it the most. And the most important step out of all of this is that we made the tests harder last year and the students did better. I think you can transform K through 12 education by staying very focused on the basics. It's all about making sure that each child gets met with the best academic opportunity that fits that child's needs. And guess what? It works.
It sounds like such common sense. But I think another thing that's really important that I think you should get more credit for is that your 2021 campaign, you really raised the issue of equity versus excellence in education. I think in 2021, a lot of people didn't know what the word equity was. We were hearing it a lot in the news we were hearing it in our schools, but we didn't understand that they were gearing kids toward everybody having the same outcome instead of making sure that our schools were driven by the search for excellent results. And so your ability to transform Virginia's education along those lines, I think it's a great model for the national GOP. And that we're going to segue into the next question here and zoom out a bit and talk about national Republican politics. So for the first time in a decade, the Republican Party is sort of searching for its identity because we're seeing the end of the post-Trump era. We're seeing the post-Trump era emerge on us. And you're a very interesting person to talk to about this because you're the only prominent Republican I can think of who nobody could accuse of riding Trump's coattails to prominence. And that's not because you don't like Trump or don't have a good relationship with him, but because you were elected a year after he left office the first time, and he was sort of at the nadir of his national influence. So you're a very interesting person to ask this question to. What does a successful Republican Party look like in the post-Trump era?
Well, Peter, I just first want to disagree on your premise of post-Trump. And I think we all need to recognize the most important obligation we have right now is to not let ourselves think about 4, 6, 8 years down the road, but to focus right now. Because the president is doing an extraordinary job. And we all need to pull together and make sure that we're supporting him in his success of that job. That means supporting the House, means supporting the Senate, and doing everything we can to collaborate for the most successful administration ever, because that's the objective. I also do firmly believe that we're at a moment where, with the election coming up in this part of 2026, we've got to stay focused on holding our House and holding the Senate, if not expanding both of our majorities. And so those two requirements, helping this administration be as successful as it can be, and of course, expanding our majorities in both the House and the Senate in 2026, I think mandate that we as a Republican Party and as Americans stay focused on those two objectives. I have to say that my experience in working with this administration has been absolutely amazing. And I can compare it to the lack of success in working with the last administration. I feel like the only thing the Biden administration ever did for me was sue me. In fact, I think if you Google DOJ and Youngkin, what comes up is they sued me because they wanted to force me to put non-citizens back on the voting rolls in Virginia. And what an amazing breath of fresh air when President Trump came in January to literally lead the revival of this nation. And we have had just the most amazing relationship with every cabinet secretary, with the vice president, with JD. His first trip was to Virginia to help us with Hurricane Helene recovery. And of course, with the president and his whole senior staff has just been unbelievably productive. Everything from the work that we have done to drive economic development. And I will say that a lot of the big wins that we got in this last year were in collaboration with Secretary Lutnick and Commerce and the president personally in order to bring big manufacturing to Virginia. The amazing work that we've seen in public safety. And I have to say, the work that we've done in collaboration with General Bondi and of course the FBI and Homeland Security has been just, I think, a template on how to collaborate. We've had thousands and thousands and thousands of violent illegal immigrants that have been arrested. We arrested the number 3 player in MS-13, and it works when you collaborate. We've seen huge success in working with the Department of Education, not only as they begin to think about how they wind many of the functions they have down because Virginia is ready for them today, but also the great work that we've done in pushing out illegal discrimination in schools. The Biden administration fought us on this, and the Trump administration is collaborating with making sure that DEI and illegal discrimination is no longer part of our higher ed system. And then I can't say enough about the work that the Department of Education and Secretary McMahon has done in order to work with us, in order to protect women and girls, their safety, their dignity, their privacy in schools. And I have to say, particularly with girls' sports, I mean, they have just been a difference maker. Again, the Biden administration fought us on every front, and the Trump administration has worked with us in order to make sure that girls play girls' sports, boys play boys' sports, that they're protected in their environment and not forced to share bathrooms with the other gender. I mean, this has been major, major change. This has all been part of, I believe, a demonstration of how states and the federal government can work together to be successful. We've got to stay focused on this, demonstrate to the American people the great 2026 that we're going to have, and then we got to go win in November.
Your point about staying in the moment is very well taken. That said, the Republican primary is already ramping up for 2028 because that's just the nature of our politics, and posturing has already begun. And we know that many people attempted to convince you to jump into the primary race in 2024, which you passed on. Well, under what circumstances would you consider taking your very successful Virginia model national in 2028?
Peter, I've been asked this question, I think, from the day I was elected in 2021. I actually think I was elected, and the next day somebody asked me this question for the first time, and I hadn't even been inaugurated yet. And I firmly believe, one, that people who spend all their time thinking about their next job fail to do the one that they've been elected to do. And that's why I have been and continue to be incredibly focused on delivering for Virginia. And I think, second of all, that Vice President Vance was right in his comments back in late November, early December, that we as a party have to hang together and we've got to stay focused on the here and now. And while it is natural to have all kinds of speculation on what will happen in 2028, I fully subscribe to the vice president's philosophy. Let's stay focused, let's deliver, let's get through our midterms, and let's make sure that Republicans are showing that we deserve the license that we've been granted. President Trump is in the White House and he is leading and making America great again. And we see a House and a Senate that are working with very thin majorities in order to deliver with him. And to me, that is our big, big focus right now. And so as tantalizing it is for many to speculate on years out, I just haven't really conducted myself that way. I stay focused on the most important things to get done now. I think that's been the hallmark of this period in governorship and administration and service in Virginia. And that's why I'm going to stay.
Well, Governor Youngkin, we encourage all of our readers and listeners to go read The Great Virginia Renaissance. And we thank you so much today for taking the time to be with us. And please come back and talk to us again soon.
Peter, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be with you. And once again, for those people that are sitting on the sidelines and wondering if they could run for office and make a difference, I'll tell you that the day that I committed to run for office was one of the toughest decisions that I made and one of the best I've ever made in my whole life. And so I'd encourage you, get off the sidelines and get in the arena because the water's fine.
Sounds good. Thank you, Governor.
Great. Thank you.